All right, we are right at 7 o'clock, so I'll call tonight's city council meeting to order. And Jolene, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmembers Erickson,
Here.
Husnick,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Councilmember Valento is absent, and Mayor Bain.
Here. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, we have an agenda before you. I will entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
I move to approve.
The motion is,
I'll second.
and we have a second. Just a quick note on the agenda this evening. We do not actually have any, other than our consent agenda, we do not have any action items on the agenda this evening. So we will move from our consent agenda straight into what we typically call some workshop sessions. And so just want to make that clear. Typically, we have a couple of items that are requiring votes, and that is just not the case this evening. So with that, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And next is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of your choice. And we have a short list here. So as I call your name, if you would, approach the podium and start with your name and address for the record. And Paul, is it Widney? Did I get that right?
You did.
All right, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Hi, my name is Paul Widmy. Address is 879 18th Street Southeast. I'm here to address the location of the machine that removes the weeds from the lake as it currently sits right now, obstructing the access for watercraft and other use. Currently, the machine is located at the intersection of Beach Drive Southeast and 19th Street Southeast. This access is in a neighborhood that is not easy to get to and is only really used by the residents in the neighborhood. We all really care for our neighborhood and the lake itself. I understand that no one person owns the lake, and we all have a right to use that. We have used that launch and cared for it for many years. I do have something that I would like to note as far as the expected use of that. I'm speaking for about 6 others that weren't able to make it tonight. On the 4th of July, I did observe someone who lives on the lake, their older children, grabbed their dual jet ski trailer, hooked it up to a four-wheeler, and although it was raining, suited up in their gear to hit the lake and went out there smiling and laughing. And once they got down there, they weren't able to put their watercraft in, and that was the end of that plan there. And they're not the only ones. That is the only access that I use. As a resident of 8 years and a realtor of 5 years, I've bought and sold properties in that specific neighborhood in which all of the clients hold an extensive amount of value on that specific launch area. When they could have more property somewhere else, they choose that place with less property due to that. Now they can no longer use that, and I was told that there really isn't anywhere for that to live, and that's where it's intended to reside. I did find a few other locations that would be suitable. Just moving forward with that, I would like to just kind of quote what typically would be done if it wasn't public domain is an easement for prescription, which is an easement created from an open adverse continuous use over a period of time, which is specific by the state and government. I know that's not applicable due to being public land, but I would like you to consider the morality of why that exists moving forward with trying to find somewhere else to locate this machine so that we can all happily continue to use the neighborhood as we've come to expect. I do have other locations that I have found for this. I know it used to reside in the canal going into the bay at the end of Woodland Drive Southeast. My understanding is that the property has turned hands or something has happened there, but there is a slip there at the end of that road, which is municipal owned land, which would give you an egress to that lakeshore. Now I understand that you need to have something that can withstand heavy axle weight from the dump truck that needs to load. So grass isn't necessarily going to be suitable for that and would cause a problem. So we do have others that I have found as well. The two best ones that I have found are at the end of Northeast 4th Avenue and Northeast Second Avenue, closer to the main launch. They're just dead-end streets with plenty of space to put down Class 5, potentially a gate. You can leave the machine there year-round. Logistically, it makes a lot of sense. Aesthetically, 4th Street would make the most sense. But either one doesn't obscure anybody's expected view or use if that was to sit there for a long extended period of time. As far as going with the invasive species and aquatic things coming in from other lakes, it's kind of a pain to actually get back to this launch where it's located now. It's a bit of a maze. We don't have lake jumpers coming back there. It's really only people that either know of it from ice fishing. There's no parking for any boats down there. You can't launch a Bennington down there. It's really just for people to put in their, 18-foot fiberglass hull, aluminum, jet skis, canoes, kayaks, basic things that the neighbors have. I know that I'd sold a property recently down the block where they held that really high on the things that they enjoyed and why they purchased that property when they were looking for more land. They actually bought a boat I have yet to see them use. So I imagine that they're probably a little upset about that. And as a realtor, you can see how when I purchased there, that was a major thing for me too. Now the house was a big deal for me. It's a little unique, but it would have been nice to have easier access and more land. But I chose that because of that amazing access and the fact that I don't jump lakes. I've got a jet ski. I'll go out for an hour and a half at a time. It's not worth it for me to go winding through the neighborhood and take it to another launch, to launch that, tie it off and all this other stuff when I used to be able to do everything in just a matter of minutes. Launch it, beach it, put the trailer in my yard, walk back, get on, enjoy that hour and a half, clean the trailer off and everything of all the aquatic things that are there, go home, rinse it off, good to go. I know that I've seen numerous people in the neighborhood that didn't notice that it was there with the weather and the holidays going down there with family, and they just circle the block. They drive by and plans canceled. So they move on. So I'd like to speak for the people that weren't here, which is at least 6 parties I have permission from. And I could say there's probably at least 10 more that I could get permission from on behalf. If you're curious about any of the information that I quoted tonight, let me know and I'll just email that over to you. But I did scout a few areas, and I think that 4th Street is going to be the absolute best, as it's got great shoreline. It would do aesthetically no damage to the neighborhood. There's great turnaround. Street can handle a 16,000-pound dump truck. Put some gravel down, a gate. You could even park a dump truck with the loader and the machine there year-round. I don't think anybody's going to balk at that situation at all. But that's really all I had to come in to say tonight, and I'd really appreciate if we can just kind of look at that morality of why the easement for prescription exists and consider, moving the machine so that we can at least get your basic watercraft in to enjoy the lake as we've come to expect over the many years that we've lived there.
Thank you for the feedback. We
Thank you.
don't have this topic on our agenda this evening, but we can have a brief discussion as part of staff update.
Sure, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
you.
Rob Simmers.
Rob Simmers, address 1819 9th Avenue Southeast. Paul kind of summed it up there. Basically, the only thing I have to add is the size of the street going in for those dump trucks to go in there there's just nothing there. So, but Paul hit everything that I was going to hit as well. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Is it Jacob Polzanski?
Jacob Polchinski. I'm at 1808 9th Avenue Southeast also. Same neighborhood. We're all here for the same reasons. Neighbor in the back is there too. She's not going to speak, but we're all here for the same reason. Kind of upset about it. So if we could make it a topic eventually and progress on this situation, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And Susan Young. Welcome.
Howdy. My name is Susan Young, 9950 199th Street North, here in Forest Lake. And the topic I wish to discuss is the sale of the property just off of Broadway, which is on your docket tonight. City Council, in both policy and statements, is the stewards of the residents' dollars. You're the folks that take care of the taxes we produce and are the growers of our community. The property that you are selling this evening, granted, was purchased by the city for probably too much at a time when we were trying to improve Broadway Avenue a long time ago. But a couple years ago, it was appraised for $130,000, plus or minus. You are selling that property tonight for $70,000. I have an issue with that. We do have, as a city, unfortunately, a long history of buying high and selling low. It's what Forest Lake is known for to many, many developers. And they do take advantage of that. I understand that the city, I'm going to quote some things, that we are trying to improve the environment for business and to encourage businesses to come to our community. And I understand that this sale and at a almost half price is considered and was stated to be a benefit to a property, to a business, a local business. I would argue that Gertens is not a local business. It does have a national footprint. I would argue that, and it was stated that they've done a wonderful job there. Well, it's not quite as nice as their Elk River facility. It's better than their Stillwater facility. But that is something that, yes, they have improved that property. I don't believe that benefiting them and providing them with, and I'm sorry that all this coming to mind is a donation, a subsidy, I believe was the term that was used earlier today, to improve the retail character of Broadway is a good use of public funds. I know of at least two other local businesses owned by Forest Lake residents that would have appreciated a similar subsidy and did come to the council for assistance. I also have a philosophical challenge to you on how one is going to determine moving forward which companies in our community are to be subsidized and which are not. And I think that there would have been a better use. Finally, I'm very concerned because in the documents and the sale documents that we have that were there, it states that Gertens is committing to minimum improvements as depicted in the concept site plan. And there are things in that concept site plan that are quite frankly substandard to what we would expect of another business. Grandma taught me that you begin the way you mean to go on. And what I have seen at that property right now is outside storage that would not be allowed by any other business, especially on Broadway, which, according to this very specific Broadway zoning, is to be well-designed and attractive. And you may have a definition, community development staff may have a different definition, but I do not consider the piles of mulch on Broadway to be either attractive or well-designed. If that is the way that they mean to be going forward, if prohibiting folks from using city property that is adjacent to theirs during our 4th of July festival that is near and dear to every Forest Laker's heart, is a way that they mean to go on in our community, I would be deeply disappointed in your ratification of the proposed sale this evening. Thank you all.
Thank you. And just for clarification, that item is not on our agenda this evening, but comments noted. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak in open forum this evening? And sure, please, if you could just start with your name and address at the podium.
Stephen Krenz, 919 North Shore Drive, Forest Lake. My parents have owned a property real close to that boat launch everybody's been talking about since 1978, and they've been using it to put their boat in and out. They haven't been able to do that this year. They're 80 years old, almost 80 years old. They don't want to be messing around looking for another launch. And then the cancellation of the Forest Lake fireworks, pretty disappointing. We had people coming over from Florida. I know people that were in town from California. A lot of people were looking forward to it. I just guess I want to know why, who made the decision, what we can do in the future to make sure that there's not a last-minute cancellation, and if there's going to be another display this year, or if the money is just wasted, or what's going on. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else for open forum? All right. Hearing none, we'll bring agenda back to council. Council, for your consideration this evening is our consent agenda. We have items 6A through 6K. I'm happy to entertain a motion or any changes.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6A through 6K.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And our consent agenda is approved. Again, we do not have any action items on our agenda this evening, so we are going to move into our discussion topics. This is a more informal discussion of council. Anything that we talk about in this section that requires official action will come back in a future city council meeting for an official vote. Let's get started tonight with 7A, which is the 2025-2026 Capital Improvement Plan presentation. And Kevin, I believe you're walking us through this.
Yes, Mayor and City Council. I will be walking you through the capital improvement plan where we are focusing in on the years 2025 and 2026. So the original 10-year capital plan was presented to City Council at the June 24th City Council meeting per request from City Council at that point to bring back at a future date, this focusing in on the next 2 years of 2025 and 2026. So what we are looking at here is just those 2 years in the 10-year capital plan. So in your packet is included the same reports that you would have saw with the 10-year capital plan, but just narrowed down to 2025 and 2026. This presentation is just going to summarize the projects that are in that plan for 2025. If you have any questions on the 2026 projects, those are included in your packet as well. So really the issue before the council tonight is just if you have any questions on these projects in the next 2 years in 25 and 26, and do you have any changes or suggestions that you want to see with these projects before we bring the preliminary 2025 budget to council in August. So these next slides just summarize the different projects that are going to be happening, broken out by department with the project number listed next to it, so you can hopefully easily find those in your packet if you want to look at specific details related to those projects. So the airport has one project slated for 2025 for $555,000. Just a reminder to council that this is 95% reimbursed from the state regarding that project. One of the priorities that City Council identified this year for the 2025 budget was some median landscaping work. There's $375,000 put into 2025 relating to that. And the golf course also has one project for tee box refurbishing for $80,000. Next, fire. We have 4 capital purchases related to the fire department in 2025. Totaling just over $250,000 related to various equipment needs and vehicles that are due for replacement. Next, Park and Recreation has 2 mowers that are due for replacement as well in 2025, totaling $143,000. Parks and Trails and Improvements, this relates to parks, whether that be trail improvements, playground equipment, it does park improvements in general. There are 4 different park improvements on the docket scheduled for 2025, totaling just over 1.5 million. One thing to note here, the Lakeside Memorial Park, the Veterans Memorial is estimated to have about 250,000 in 2025, with some costs also in 2026. This city did receive state bonding for that, so that is included in this funding. The city council also approved a $100,000 contribution to this project as well. Next, police has 6 vehicles and/or equipment that are due for replacement in 2025, totaling just over $300,000. Public Works again has 6 items again due for replacement. Some machinery and some trucks due for replacement, totaling $765,000. And then lastly, we have some replacements due in our enterprise funds, water and sewer. Water has 3 projects totaling $645,000. Sewer has some sewer lining projects that will cost $530,000. And then we also have 1 piece of machinery that will be purchased, a skid loader for $93,000, with funding split between the 3 utility funds, water, sewer, and surface water management. Lastly, one of the larger items is our streets projects. There are 6 listed for 2025, totaling just about 9.7 million, with the big one being the North Shore Trail Maintenance Project being $5.9 million, scheduled for construction in 2025. So the purpose of that was just to give you a high level here of the projects for 2025, really start the discussion focusing in on that year. If you have any questions on these projects, staff and myself are happy to answer those. All the details on these projects are also included in your packet, where you can go look to get more details on what's being purchased, why it's being purchased, or why these projects need to be completed. With that, I open it up to council for any discussion and questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Council, questions, thoughts specific to 2025?
Well, I'll just say I really appreciate the way you put this information together for us tonight and just narrowed it down, and all the detail that is in that new software I found incredibly helpful. So thank you for that, Kevin and team.
Yeah, I agree. It's helpful to see kind of this level of detail. In our last meeting, for those who are kind of watching this evening, we kind of saw the broader picture of the full 10 years. And now as we're kind of closing in on 2025 budget time, it's kind of an opportunity to look in the more near term. I have more, my discussion items are or thoughts to share are more on the 2026, looking a little further extended out. I don't really have anything on 2025. I look at the list, and these are projects that we have, the larger ones at least, have had a fair amount of discussion, but certainly happy to hear any other thoughts council may have.
So just as long as we're on this slide here, and maybe it was in the packet and I likely missed it, but the Highway 97 project, that 1.6, that's our portion, the city's portion of that to the state.
Correct. That's our portion of the project, and that is, we are using MSA funds to pay for our portion of the project.
Then if you could back up to some park things, namely the e-boxes at Castlewood. You know, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we're looking at spending about, well, just shy of $1 million out in Castlewood for the next 4 years. I think the public might be a little surprised to hear that, $1 million at a municipal golf course. I know it's a lot of it is deferred maintenance and that. I'd like to see that pushed until we have a new contract with a new, potentially new user, or the next one, which I believe that contract ends in 25. Is that correct? I'd just like to see a deeper dive on that as to what the public really wants out of that amenity. And by just putting 80,000 at it, or maybe if we, like we did a tour of the Public Works facility, maybe we go out there and take a look at that. It's just, we're looking to spend a lot of money out there in the next couple of years, and that's just a bit concerning.
And contrary to my previous comments on, there's a number of items on here that have been well vetted. That topic of deferred maintenance at Castlewood has been a topic that we have just kind of, as a large banner, we have said we know there's deferred maintenance. So to your point on breaking that into further pieces and kind of discussing timing of that investment and what that looks like, I think that is prudent. So I would agree. I'm not concerned so much on 80,000 in this next year of some T-box refurbishing, but to your point on the larger items, so certainly worth some larger investment. I would also, when we're talking about Castlewood, I think we also have to point out that our restrictions for that property are quite limited, right? And so anytime we're talking about Castlewood, we kind of end up in this conversation of, is it worth it? I suspect council will find that that property is going to continue to be a municipal golf course, and if it's going to be a municipal golf course, it should be a, it should be a good one and a well-maintained one. And so, but how we get there is certainly something we should be talking about.
Staying on that topic for a second, looking out to 26, where it is being proposed to upgrade the irrigation facility or elements. I'd really be curious, Dave, I know you mentioned at our last meeting that there's a fair amount of patchwork that's happening on a regular basis. As we get to that deeper conversation, if there's any way to kind of get an understanding of what is the cost of not doing something, because I'm sure there's some number that's attached to that. That would be helpful as we try to make that decision.
Specific, because we're on this topic, and so specific to T-box refurbishing, if we have a placeholder in budget, is that a particular project we would bring back through parks as we kind of think about what that looks like? I'm trying to just get to what is the kind of the definition that we need to have tonight, or as we walk into budget season, and then kind of tee up for council what might happen next related to kind of scoping on what a project might look like.
As far as when you need to decide if you need to do the T-boxes
Yeah.
or not? Like, not going anywhere, so they'll be there whenever.
And is it all T-boxes is that what's currently scoped?
Two specific ones that are, and one that's kind of water that needs to kind of it's a recommendation from Foursome Golf, who runs the course, so it's able to play on excuse me, what's there now. It's just would be an one's an improvement, one's a maintenance.
So Mayor, I just have to give my little spiel again, though, as we talk about timing and when you need to decide, because I really don't want you to have to push all of these decisions till December. And particularly for 25, if there's things that you don't think you want to do and you want to push it back to 26, give us that direction, because otherwise staff will spend the time getting those things ready. And just to make sure that they're spending their time where you want them to, I would ask you to try and think about some of those tough decisions sooner rather than later. As Kevin mentioned, you'll see this again in August. You'll obviously see it again before final adoption in December. But I just want to kind of put that reminder out there that the direction that you can give us will help us with work plan and doing things sooner. So
Specific to that question, are there further thoughts on T-boxes in 2025? we okay with that, and it's the bigger irrigation is the larger conversation? Okay.
Yeah, I guess, we got some big numbers on parks here, and we still don't have a park commission in place. So spending any of this money without having that insight from the public is concerning to
Fair.
me. So, we're moving forward with belts on redoing the tennis courts and basketball and doing some improvements on the warming house. That's fine, but time to get some people in place to get their input.
Piggybacking on that, I mean, I know a couple of the projects in here, I think it was at Bayview Park, is about 450,000 for playground equipment replacement. And in the detail, it talked about how, it's at the end of its useful life, right? It's like a 20-year, and we're at year 24. Does the fact that it's at the end of its useful life, dictate that it has to be done, or is it just falling apart? I mean, I don't remember that being the case. Are those sorts of projects, to Councilmember Roberts' point, as far as getting more public input as far as, where to focus our energy? I mean, do we feel like we have that information? Is that how these were identified, or can you speak to that a little bit?
Year that goes on past probably 20 years, it just keeps falling apart. It starts rusting, the coating comes off and all that. So, I mean, it's probably a safety thing and a aesthetics thing too, if you drive by. Park right at the park, and that doesn't look good. Also a safety concern, 25 is probably still pushing it, but 30-year for sure, you're gonna have a pretty rough-looking playground.
So what I hear you saying is that some of that park equipment that's beyond its useful life is at that point of deterioration.
There's some that are even under 20 years that it's past its useful life just by the usage of it. Close to it, we're just picking a year and going with it. I mean, it's kind of used. Just like with a plow truck or a pickup truck, you have a lot of data that knows, try to catch it before it falls apart. Otherwise, then you're shutting a park down, and then it's why is a park down? Maybe could you get another year out of where we have it slated? Possibly, but also we don't want it to get to that point where it's catch up with not just this one, but now we've stacked more of them, just like with try to do is lay it out so you're not having a all at once to try to space it out to try to always on that budget.
Yeah, the problem with that stuff, it never goes down in value. It keeps going up and up, but if we can keep up with it somehow.
Just like belts, that it's obsolete. So, I mean, you get to a point where they just quit making replacement parts too. Then you can't buy parts.
What was my next question? What we're putting in this replacement, is it kind of similar, or is it like ADA compliant, or what are we looking at?
So that budget would include, a like playground structure, but then hard surfacing for ADA compliance, like the lakeside, the rubber coating, trying to get away from rubber mulch, and mulch is really the answer either, because that's number is trying to tie in a new playground with new surface.
Other comments on 2025?
It just, so these numbers contemplate a levy increase that I think there was a conversation about to the council, what we were comfortable with. This, with all the additional, is that in the ballpark of where we kind of gave the direction to, or is it?
Yes, Councilmember Roberts, the short answer is yes. We are staying within that direction you gave us previously, following, I don't recall the exact percentage offhand, but what it was presented and approved in the 10-year capital plan. We are following those guidelines and what you provided staff earlier with that. So all these projects do have a funding source tied to it, which you can see in the project details and fall within that range.
Kevin, were you going to kind of walk through 2026 as well tonight, or are we holding that for another discussion?
I was not, I don't have it specifically laid out like this for 2025. All the 2026 details are in your packet, which I can sure tee it up for council if you would like, just to give you a high-level overview for what we're looking at, pointing out some of the major ones. Otherwise, if there's any specific questions, we can sure answer those as well. Just what would you like?
I think it'd be helpful to at least, there's a couple of large items coming in 2026 that are kind of, they're newer. There's certain projects we have had on the capital improvement plan for a long time, and so now as they're coming up, it's a little bit of an easier discussion. There's a couple of things in 2026 that are newer and I think still pretty early in scoping, so I think it'd be good to get at least a first level or next level round of conversation on those.
Want to talk about the boat launch and the shoreline study?
Well,
We just
I think those might be the elephants in the room, for
medians
sure.
too. I don't mean to leave out,
Yeah.
those, but
I mean, so I know, I appreciate, we're getting new information on potential projects and feedback from EDA and feedback from council and I think we're at the early stages of scoping. As I just look at 2026, something that makes me squirm and have some heartburn is the amount that is estimated for that boat launch and the amount and also the timing on specifically the shoreline at Lakeside Memorial Park. It's a large number. Are we proposing, the shoreline is at $1.1 million?
Right now for the shoreline is 1.4 million, and just note too, right now the funding sources are estimating that half of that would be coming from outside sources, whether those are grants or donations, with half of that then being funded from the city is how it's currently slated into 2026. Same with the boat launch, the total cost being $500,000, 250 of that would be outside grants, donations, and then 250,000 from the city is where we currently have it estimated as, and as a placeholder to, as council did identify these as a priority that you would like to discuss, so more or less as a placeholder, so we don't lose sight of these items and that we keep those conversations going, not only this year, but for sure next year if it's something that the city council wants to continue to move forward with.
Just knowing those dollars, especially as it relates to the shoreline, also comes from the parks budget, just knowing our current playground equipment situation and the conversation that we just had related to some of that equipment that has been on our list for a very long time and it is beyond its useful life. I'm just struggling with the timing and the prioritization of the shoreline in the very near term. It's just something that stands out. I'm not sure that is our next best move in the next 3 years, but again, it's just my opinion after looking at it and also just kind of seeing what's happened on deferred maintenance overall on parks. It was just my initial reaction.
I would tend to agree, other than, a stabilization's issue. I think that, addressing that, adding more amenities to it, or lower access, I don't know how that, how you justify that with other park concerns.
The boat launch also struck me as $500,000 for that boat launch it just struck me as a lot. It was far more expensive than what I was expecting. I don't know what goes into that boat launch and what is all entailed, but if there is a way for us to find a smaller footprint, it'd just be good to know more of what's entailed in that. And also, both of these projects are attached to external funding that we haven't started on. And so I think we get ourselves quickly into a chicken and egg that if we're asking for external funding, we need to have some level of detail of what we're looking for. And so council kind of having that defined before we're going out to ask for those funds, I think is going to be important to securing them, which then kind of prompts this conversation on what's our appetite.
That'd have to be the deciding factor, really, because that's, you know,
Right.
we're not talking about $500,000 for just the city, so. What kind of funding can we expect there, Kevin? Do you know? DNR?
If I'm,
I would defer to Abby or Dave to answer those questions.
if I might just be able to chime in, at least with the shoreline, with the boat launch, for sure, the DNR. We actually have a meeting this week to start conversations with them about rehabilitation of the boat launch. We talk about the useful life of our playground equipment. We're nearing the end of the useful life of the infrastructure that was created, that downtown launch. We'll need to do something to rehabilitate it if it's not going to be relocated. We don't know what that looks like because the last study was what could we do about moving the launch. So we studied that, and so we do need to do a little more legwork. I acknowledge that $500,000 amount is high. I hope it's high, but I am confident that we can definitely seek partnership with the DNR on something there. Shoreline study, because of the erosion, I think we definitely have a greater than not chance of working with our watershed district partners, potentially the DNR, and even maybe through potential bonding sources to capture some of the funding to be able to stabilize that shoreline. Whether or not there's additional improvements at the time, I think it's going to be looking at, okay, for this $100 we get this, if for this $125 we get this, and but to the point that I think Kevin's trying to make is there 26 projects? If they're not in there, we're not doing them. And so they're just the idea of putting them in there to try to start thinking about that, for us to be able to have those conversations and investigate further those costs is really important now, because if you remove them, I'm not likely going to go and continue conversations with those partners.
I don't think you would remove them, but maybe you would move them back, is what you're saying, that it shouldn't leapfrog over some of the other projects? Or maybe the shoreline needs to be spread out over multiple years, or some way of breaking it down? Is that what you're?
I mean, yeah, I think maybe my struggle is they've recently become known and it has had some energy behind it, but also a lot of the park improvements have been on a much longer time, a much slower bake. And so it's the leapfrogging, it feels like it's kind of leapfrog to the top of the list that I just want us to pause and just affirm that, is that the right move, or is it more, playground equipment based and some of these other shoreline items wait? I appreciate that the boat launch, we don't have a lot of time just because of the nature of the renewal with the DNR, and that may not be able to move. But I don't know if the timeframe would be for the shoreline, if that would maybe make sense to talk back, 3-4 years.
Mayor and City Council, if I may, just to note with these two projects, the shoreline and the boat launch, no other park projects or playground equipment got pushed back because of these two items. These two items were just strictly adds into the park kind of 10-year plan from last year based on the priority discussion that we had earlier this year. So just note that nothing got moved out of 26 because these two got added in. Just wanted to make that note.
Also, this is the season when we have a lot of appetite. It isn't a question of, do we kick anything down the, what cans do we kick down the road? Like, we're going to have to move some things out because we know going into this budget that there's way more front-loaded as far as needs than what we're able to do. So it's more of which ones do we prioritize to the top, so.
And I would, if there's bandwidth with staff, we've already have some meetings set up with some of these partners, at least explore that, and maybe it is a 27, but we still have a better idea of what that funding might look like.
I would agree. I jumped us straight into these topics on 2026. Were there other things for 2026 that we should also have some additional conversation on? Otherwise, I suspect Christina and Kevin, our future conversations are going to be very 2025 focused. Is that kind of what we would expect?
More long-range one that we'll have when we unveil the new financial management plan
Perfect.
later this month, but then after that, we will focus heavily on 25.
Okay. And that is our next meeting
Yeah,
yet
Ellers
this
is
month,
coming
right?
July 23rd.
Any other items for 2026? Any other points of feedback overall on the capital plan? Okay, as Christina mentioned, Ellers will be here to present full updated 10-year plan at our next meeting this month, and then we'll move into more specific discussions on the 2025 budget. So, very good. Kevin, Christina, anything else you need from us?
Oh, thank you.
Great. Kevin, thanks for putting this additional detail together. Very helpful. All right, next topic is the discussion of one-way streets, and Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So recently, the city received a petition from a neighborhood who wanted to turn current two-way street into a one-way street. So staff was spending some time looking into all the different things that would need to be done, including refuge, emergency services, public works for street sweeping, snow plowing, all that stuff, the things that would change if it went to a one-way. And as we kind of got further down that step, we thought maybe it was a better way to start with city council to see your appetite for, number one, even wanting to entertain petitions or turning two-way roads into one-way roads. And if so, if you want staff to develop some type of a policy or something that we can evaluate a petition on to decide, kind of like a streetlight request, you know, do they hit these parameters before we even bring them to council? Can they get administratively declined before they come here, or does everyone come to council? Things like that. So I guess for tonight for discussion would be, you know, does the city as a whole want to entertain requests for one-way streets? And it's kind of like streetlight requests, because if you get one request, you're probably going to get other ones once they figure out one-ways are a possibility. So if we do want to entertain them, it'd be good to get a policy or some type of a procedure that we do to So what I'm looking for tonight is some discussion with council to see what your preference is and how you'd like to go with that. So tonight, we're not going to discuss that petition. I don't want to use that as an example, just more or less as a whole, what we'd like.
Dave, as we get into this further, are there reasons why today we don't do one-way? Like, what is the city's position of the default, or is it more of it's just been the tradition and we haven't had a strong, is there a staff preference for two-way, or is there not a preference?
I think unless you have two one-ways back-to-back, like where you have a split pair, or you have a situation where there's the next block up is a one-way going back, it's difficult for public works for sure, just because you're having to circle around an entire block, or you're gonna have to go wrong way on a one-way to, say, plow snow or to sweep. Emergency services, it can be an issue, but I think if there's an emergency, they're just gonna go the wrong way on a one-way street. Learning curve too, I mean, it kind of depends on placement too. If you have two ways and just one way in the middle of two ways, then it's kind of confusing. You don't know how to get yourself back out of there, or you might have to drive a long ways to get back to where you started. a lot of things that go into it, and that's just kind of why we're here and asking that question. Ryan probably has some engineering comments on that as well.
Just want to bring up a couple items to think about. So when we did reach out to the garbage service, they are going to require the garbage containers be placed on one side of the street. So say if you live on this side, but they want to go that way, everyone has to take their garbage across the street and set it on somebody else's driveway area or along that. That might create some pushback or difficulty, especially in the winter months. And the other thing is, let's say you're 3 or 4 houses in where the one-way starts, but you don't want to go all the way around, and you go whatever's shortest for you, that's happen, easiest pathway for a resident, so then it might come to some enforcement issues. How will you enforce it then? Would have a few extra signage to be installed in these areas too, so more maintenance, but.
And what's being proposed is, I'm assuming for existing streets, right? So this isn't a strategy to be able to reduce our street footprint size. I think in some communities, that's when they are used, and that's not the case here, right? They already meet our standards at the time. It's just that it's an existing street that residents want to become one-way. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. Some of them are, like this petition in specific is an older cabin road, right? So it's probably not a full 28 feet back to back. So it is smaller to that point where I understand that it's a smaller road, but it still acts as one. So, and that the other question too is petition, right? If you have a petition, is it just the people that are affected on that one way, or do they have to get people from more connecting roads that are in favor of this, because that one way is going to cut off other forms of traffic? Just to Ryan's point, now you're going to kind of one road to get out, now they can't go that way and go all the way around.
It could create more traffic on another street if everybody has to go out the one way or something. So you have to consider that too.
Yeah, so it sounded like a great idea just to review it and bring it to council, but then, like I said, we started going through all the things, and I don't know if we want to start entertaining them, because there is a lot of, smaller lake roads around the lake and the old part of the city that I could see wanting to do the same thing. And then we're here discussing or deciding which ones should be, which ones shouldn't, and what the parameters are and all that.
So in most cases, is it normal for a city to have a policy to allow one-ways? Is that common in a city to have actually a policy for this as opposed to one-offs? We just approved one at Forest Hills Preserve. That's a one-way, brand-new development. How did that come about? Was there any discussion, council level, about allowing that?
No, I think that kept the road size down, was able to shrink the size of the road down for that one way.
It's probably more common for new roads, not changing existing roads.
It just seems like in this, and I know you don't want us to talk specifically about this one, but these people know that neighborhood more than anyone. And if you have a majority of a neighborhood signing a petition asking for that, I think that has some credence there, and you have to do what we've done, explore maybe the issues of why it wouldn't work. But to have a boilerplate blanket policy on something like this, when there are so much uniqueness to these different neighborhoods, just seems might be a little bit too much or overkill.
We have an ability to assess the costs. So there is signage needs to be changed, striping needs to be, if there is striping. Some of these are maybe old cabin roads, there is no striping. I'm thinking of one in particular that I think the neighborhood already probably treats it like a one-way. Is there an ability for us to assess some of those costs to make the change? Amanda's nodding.
Amanda says yes.
I mean, I think that's
Council
part
says
of,
yes.
I think, I do think that if we approve one in one neighborhood, I think we can all probably think of 3 to 5 that are likely candidates of residents potentially wanting that. And if that is what a majority of residents on that street want, maybe we should entertain it, but I also think that they should bear that cost of the signage and what that takes. Because there is something about drivers today in Forest Lake are not accustomed to one-ways, and so you need some ample signage to make that change and to make that safe. And if we were to entertain, I think the residents should also kind of pick up that costs, or pick up that, what that takes. I worry about there is a point in time of a group of residents who at a point in time will think it's a good idea, but that is also a very permanent decision. And the person who buys the house at the end of that one-way, gosh, do we then entertain the petition in the other direction? Now we want it to be two-way? I don't know.
Kind of like buying a house at the end of a dead end.
That's right.
In your time here, Dave, or like in Ryan, how many, have we had any requests? Is this, that's not already like a new development, like again, Forest Hills Preserve? Have we had some requests for one-ways?
I have not, no.
That's a long time.
It may not be as big of an issue as you think.
I understand the streetlight analogy, like, okay, if one neighborhood gets a streetlight, then wait a minute, how'd you get that? That just seems a little, but this just seems like, for having neighbors really want a one-way, I don't think I'd want a one-way personally. In this particular case, I understand why they do, but it does make it just changes things, so.
Other perspectives on, seems like you're maybe leaning towards allowing it?
Allowing it, maybe there is some just general guidelines about a petition being in place by a majority of the neighbors and some of that, so that you can't have two people make that change for 15 other people.
Probably have a public hearing as a part of that if it's going to affect other
Yeah.
neighbors. And
Definitely would need to have a public hearing.
Case by case.
Yeah. I think there's, Christina, you bring up a good point, which is I think we're all thinking of a couple of streets that are quite narrow, many of them happen to be near the lake, but there's probably potentially some that aren't near the lake that are just old cabin roads that design no longer easily fits two-way traffic. But to your point, then preventing, or modern design street neighbors just for whatever reason wanting that to become a one-way, we should probably have some consideration of that. I also think that part of that should be just the information back to residents that this is what this means. This is what it means for garbage pickup. This is what it means for school bus stops or whatever that might look like. Like, we should have some information back just so that they're making an informed decision, not assuming that, they're going to be able to keep their trash on whatever side of the street they want, and whatever those other logistics might be.
The garbage deal on it might be a deal breaker right there for people having to drag it across or have someone else's garbage on your side of the street. They might.
Right, or your garbage across the street in a spot that isn't cleared.
Right.
Right.
Snow.
Right. Other, trying to get us to a level of additional specificity, other thoughts? Open to entertaining it?
I'm open to entertaining it. I mean, I think we're talking about a policy here, which in the policy might be that it's a kind of a case-by-case situation, but at least has to meet these minimum requirements of, X width of road and X number of percentage of the neighborhood being on board, and
Neighbors on a petition.
there's, cost associated that Amanda's gonna get the number on per resident affected. If they really want it, here's what it's gonna cost you. That help? Is that enough information for a draft of a policy?
Yep.
Any other points of feedback? All right, let's move into staff updates, and then we'll move into our closed sessions after staff updates. Jolene?
Just a little reminder, early voting has started for the state primaries already. We're starting to get into the thick of election season, so folks can place their early votes out at the Washington County Service Center. And then starting on July 30th, we'll start accepting affidavits of candidacy for local seats here at the city.
Thank you. Kevin?
No further updates.
Christina?
No updates.
Amanda?
Yes, Your Honor. Council, just a quick update on the new search for permanent city administrator. I do have 2 consultants so far that are interested and will be providing proposals for your consideration on the 23rd. I have phone calls into a few others, and I have a call with one other person scheduled tomorrow. So I'm optimistic that I'll have at least 3 proposals for your consideration on the 23rd, potentially more.
Fabulous. Thank you. Dave?
No updates.
Very good. Ryan?
No updates.
Dave Peterson?
Yeah, Mayor and City Council members, good evening. I just want to give an update on the July 4th festivities. They went very well. I want to thank Public Works and Fire and Parks and all staff that assisted in organizing and planning the July 4th festivities, and especially all the officers. It's always every year, all hands on deck. And I'll have some preliminary numbers for you in regards to calls for service over the festivities and hours and those types of things that I know you're always interested in hearing about. So once again, thank you to all the police personnel and all city staff who assisted.
Chief Newman?
Mayor and Council, I only have one update. Happy to report that we did not have any fireworks-related injuries or fires during the whole 4th of July event.
Thank you, Chief. And Abby?
You might have seen in your weekly updates, we got the community corn feed coming up at end of August, and you're going to continue to hear from me. We are in need of volunteers, at least 8 to serve, in 2, I think it's 3-hour chunks. So get a hold of myself or Dave or Don to sign up.
Mandatory hours, council, right? We're all there. If you're not out of town, you're there.
Please reach out to us and let us know, just because as a reminder, we don't have existing staff that's always been running this. So getting that head count in advance and maybe even getting our own tutorial on how it goes might be helpful.
Very good. Thank you, Abby. Dave, we had a number of comments in public forum about the weed harvester and where that is currently being stored, and you had given council an update in kind of a previous council meeting. I just wanted to clarify, our policy on vehicle access on those lake points, I know sometimes there is a difference between what policy is and how neighborhoods traditionally use those, but can you just clarify what our policy has been on vehicle access for those lake points?
So typically, well, not typically, the code says if it's not stated that it's for motorized vehicles, then motorized vehicles cannot use that access. So if it's not signed, motor vehicle access allowed, then it's not allowed.
So not allowed unless signed, and there is not typically motor vehicle allowed at that access, is that right?
It is only allowed if it is signed,
Yep.
saying it's allowed. If there's no signage, then there's.
Okay.
And just to touch back on 4th and 2nd Northeast, know where Beach Drive is. The reason why that is a good spot is because it's right in between lakes 1 and 2. You had your harvester parked all the way at 4th Northeast to go and cut, and Second Lake would take you about an hour just to drive there, and you would cut a load and drive an hour back. You'd get a load a day. So Woodland Drive was a good spot in the previous life because it was basically the same location where you could cut out of 2 lakes in one central spot. So, and we've looked at other spots, but they would be good spots. He has a very good point, but you would travel for, to cut 2 loads, you'd travel for 8 hours, you'd burn gallons of diesel fuel to cut 2 loads of weeds. So we're looking for spots, and I mean, it is a city-owned parcel. It's not a right-of-way, it's actual city land by the lake. So it's all within our means, and I understand that what was always used for, but it also is not a public access either. So we can look and try to find other spots, but I don't think we're gonna find anything in that location that is, number one, deep enough, and number two, in that central location that'll allow us to keep cutting. So as long as the expectation is to continue running the harvester, we have to have something in that centrally located spot, or otherwise we're just driving that thing.
How many loads are you typically able to get in a day currently?
When you're close to the harvester, you can get up to probably 8 dump truck loads. If you're traveling like halfway across the lake, you're probably down to like 4. It all depends. And then as you get later in the year, you'll get, our highest day was 12 loads in one day, just that close to the conveyor. So
A lot of weeds.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Let's move on to council updates, and Councilmember Roberts.
I don't really have any updates. Just want to thank Public Works and Public Safety for the handling everything this weekend. It's always a big chore for them, and I appreciate that. And I know it was a really hard decision by the city to cancel the fireworks, and, you know, I hope that we can get a date scheduled here soon. And I don't know, I'm assuming that's the Legion's decision to work with us on that because of the funding, right? And so, not an easy decision, and hopefully we can come up with a plan B going forward on a scenario like that, like other cities have made that switch relatively quickly, and I know it's not easy to do, but work, you guys.
Councilmember Husnick.
No updates tonight, thanks.
Councilmember Erickson.
No additional updates, just thanks to Public Works and the police. It was an awesome weekend, and saw the street sweeper out there bright and early every morning, just keeping the place looking great, so appreciate that.
Yeah, I just echo the comments and echo the thanks. The Legion always does an amazing job every year, and they're a great partner with us on a great event. So many thanks to them and all of their volunteers, and then also our Public Works and our Public Safety officers for a great, safe event. I know the call on the fireworks is a challenging call to make. I would say that we have, between our team that was in the room and the Legion team that was in the room to make that call, we have the best people in the room to make that decision, given the information that's known at the time. It's always fun to Monday morning quarterback on what may or may not come through on a weather prediction, and what may also come through on alternatives for fireworks. So challenging call to make, but I would assure that we had the best people to make a very difficult decision. So thank you for being there to make that difficult decision, and look forward to a great fireworks night when we're able to get that safely scheduled. So Legion will be working with city staff, and we'll get that announced as soon as we know. So thanks to everyone for a great weekend. We are going to move into a closed session on a couple of topics. We'll move into those closed sessions, and then that will be the end of our planned agenda. We will then just come back into this room to adjourn. And so with that, I would move that we move into a closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D05, Subdivision 3B, and the attorney-client privilege for discussion with the attorney representing the city in connection with threatened litigation in the matter of Forrester versus the City of Forest Lake et al. Is there a second for a closed session?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and we're in closed session.
Mayor, could we announce both closed sessions before we go?
I'm sorry?
There's 2 closed sessions
Oh,
on the agenda.
I'm
Could
sorry.
we do both?
Yes.
Do the other one too before we go?
I will also, subsequent to this first closed session, I would move that we move into our second closed session, which is pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D05, Subdivision 3B, for a confidential attorney-client discussion regarding threatened litigation by Northern Plains Aviation, et cetera.
I'll second.
And second for closed session, all those in favor for the second closed session, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, and we also are clear for a second closed session.